Thank you so much, Scott. And thank you so much, Justin, for being here with me. I'm so excited because we now have the ESC updated heart failure guidelines. For the first time, we have a guideline-directed medical therapy for HFpEF. Yay! And it's frankly thanks to a lot of work that you've done. But we can now treat it with a class 1 therapy. I think that actually behooves us to then detect and diagnose the condition earlier, right? So I don't know. What do you think is the main problem? Why aren't we finding these cases?
Well, we're not finding these cases sometimes because we aren't looking under the right stones. Many of the patients with heart failure, and especially preserved ejection fraction, aren't declaring themselves the way patients with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction are. They often they don't see cardiologists. They live with internists and primary care physicians, and they need to be able to know that this is a patient who might have heart failure, who should be potentially referred to a cardiologist for these guideline-directed medical therapies that now exist.
Yeah, but don't you think now, if we make a diagnosis of heart failure, you could actually, if you're sure of it, start treating, and then the guidelines honestly just say, to make a diagnosis of heart failure, we need symptoms and signs, we need to know the ejection fraction is whatever it is, and then find some objective evidence that the symptoms are coming from the heart, right? So why can't we do this at a GP level, or for example? What do you think?
So there's a couple problems, and there's always solutions. The biomarkers have been great. They've actually got paved the way because things like NT-proBNP just being available. That's the simple thing, and in the hands of the right people, as in family doctors, internists, you name it. That actually helps get things going. The other issue is access to imaging around the world is different from in different countries, different geographical locations within countries. So the access to imaging is a real barrier for a lot of centers. Can you get simple things can you get an echo? Can you get a high quality echo? Can you get that echo in a timely fashion? And that really has been a barrier for I think most health systems. Not so much the very high end, you can get it tomorrow. Most of the world, it's weeks to months down the road, and even then you're wondering about the quality and fidelity of the images.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of reminding me though of in the bad old days, even an EKG to diagnose an MI could be a big problem. But we've managed, if I could say, with some AI and automation to put that in the hands of primary care. Echo, of course, I'd love to chat about that, but in the first place, what about the argument that do we even need an echo anymore? These things work no matter what, so what do you think?
I absolutely think we need an echo, and we need an echo for a number of reasons. We need an echo because, first of all, we really do, at this point, need to understand whether a patient has heart failure with reduced or preserved ejection fractions. The treatments are different. The guideline-directed medical therapies are different. For example, with HFrEF, we would want a patient to be on a beta blocker. We'd probably want that patient to be on sacubitril, valsartan, an MRA, and an SGLT2 inhibitor. With heart failure with mildly reduced or preserved ejection fraction, the evidence-based guidelines currently include SGLT2 inhibitors, plus or minus some other things that we have the option to use, especially in the lower mid-range, mildly reduced heart failure patients. I also think it's important in HFpEF because we are still not great at being sure that these are patients who have the heart failure syndrome. When a patient shows up with shortness of breath and even some edema, and they tell me that they can't walk up a flight of stairs, even if the NT-proBNP is a little elevated, I want to know that there's a problem with the heart. I want to know that so I will look at the ejection fraction, but I'll also look at the left atrium. I'll also look at some of the diastolic indices, even though they're not necessary, and so forth. And we do that because we want to know that this patient has a problem with their heart and not one of these other things that can mimic the same signs and symptoms of heart failure.
Or even to look specifically for the mimickers, right? I mean, our amyloid, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, valve disease, and so on. So in that sense, thanks, Justin, you anchored that Lancet Digital Health paper. You know, I really think it's got some important messages. I mean, what is the message from that in the context of what we just talked about? You know?
Sure. So, I mean, a couple key things are, you know, if you're going onto the stream of how do we detect heart failure for faster or better, and you want to think how is our time to triple or quadruple therapy, then you have to have the measurements by which to do so on imaging. And I think the validity of the measurements from that's the paper. It says, are the measurements in when you go into an AI world, the measurements are of high validity. And I think that's what a clinician's got to know is, can I trust these measurements? So the paper really gets at, if you take multiple cohorts and you keep testing versus expert human readers, you see the message again and again. It's as good, if not better than humans. And part of that is less variability. And so each of those images and numbers we need to trust. The validity to get down to the downstream to detect heart failure means we can, because we can trust the images and the numbers coming from that. And I think that message came through from just doing it in multiple cohorts again and again. You compare it to the gold standard, which is Dr. Scott Solomon's Echo Lab, and you say, well, that's the gold standard. If it's as good as that, I'm pretty happy in clinical care to trust the numbers we're getting from AI.
Yeah. Do you want to elaborate on your gold standard core lab, what you guys did over there?
Well, I think we're testing and looking at, especially at meetings like the ESC, some wonderful new AI platforms for all of cardiovascular diagnosis. And what we have to do when we think about how to incorporate AI into our practices, we have to understand how does it work compared to the way we have been doing things for many years. So we were very excited to be able to actually validate the S2 AI algorithms in our core lab by comparing the software, the AI-based measurements, to 3 sonographers who were trained to do this, and we're doing this day in and day out on patients with real heart disease. And the results were fabulous. As you know, they're now published in Nature Communications, and we have certainly used that as the anchor for moving forward with utilizing AI in a broader way in the core laboratory.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that. So the validation in a core lab, and then the external validation in real world, very diverse, huge cohorts around the world. When I first suggested, or when you first heard that AI could potentially do this, what did you really think before you went to test it? Did you?
I was so skeptical. I
know, I could feel it.
I said, people have been trying to do this for a long time. Yeah. I don't think it's going to work. I was very skeptical, but I have come around to realizing that not only does it work, but we absolutely need this. We need this.
Spending too much time wasting.
Look, if a sonographer could spend all their time imaging and not making measurements, you could increase the throughput in most echo labs that have long waits of 6 to 8 weeks to get somebody in. You can double the throughput potentially in a lab. In the research setting, there are all sorts of efficiencies as well. So I think this is the way we have to go. And of course, using this connected to handheld devices so that you can do this in the field, do this in doctors' offices is going to be crucial.
And were you surprised, by the way, at the performance in the real world? I mean, those are some real world echoes.
Yeah. So look, was I surprised? I don't think I was just surprised, because I thought we're going to get there. I just don't know how soon. But it's trust but verify. And I think the verification is what really anchored. It's like we're going to get there. If it's in my lifetime, or hopefully not the end of my lifetime, we're going to get there. It was way earlier than I thought. So it's more like a verify, but trust but verify. And I think in the end game here is, if we're going to try to detect and treat heart failure over here as a clinician, we are so much closer on that pathway now than we were even when I started as a fellow. Or we're so much closer, because NT-proBNP was a miraculous breakthrough. But now this is just Like we're just so much closer. Like Echo becoming an AI tool, like a tool is that is AI driven. Now we can institute algorithms. Now we can actually, in my lifetime, I have no doubt by the time I retire, it's not going to be me doing this. It's going to be a lot more automated across the board, which is fantastic for patients. That's the goal.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you so much, Scott. I just really can't thank you enough.